Video about Bitcoin, Bitcoin's future price appreciation, price potential. We're going to be talking about what happens when Bitcoin becomes 5% of the world's global assets in the future, both about Bitcoin and about MicroStrategy share price. But we're going to talk about it in a slightly different way today. We're going to talk about it in terms of Reddit. Many of you watching may not be familiar with Bitcoin on Reddit, but it's something still that probably you should be aware of because it's a very important time in Bitcoin's history, right? Right now we have Bitcoin Twitter or Bitcoin X, let's say, but before that we had Bitcoin Reddit. It's been around here for a lot longer. It has millions of users, 7.5 million users. Of course, there were Bitcoin talk forums in the very, very early days, but I think it's still useful to go back in time a little bit and look at Reddit because, the community of Bitcoiners is still pretty active on Reddit, even though it's quite a different niche and style and kind of discussion than versus what's happening on other platforms. So without further ado, before anything else, let's address the elephant in the room, the $100,000 elephant in the room. Bitcoin is back over 100 grand. Bitcoin recently crashed down to the mid 90s. A lot of people were saying, oh, it's going to go to 80, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it still will, but I think that's quite funny that we are back over $100,000. At the time of recording, it is $101,900. So 100 grand is pretty boring now, right? A few months ago, it was quite exciting. And now it's quite dull again because people are goldfish that have very, very short attention spans. So speaking of short attention spans, let's get back to Reddit here. So back to Reddit. What is the point I want to make here today? The point I want to make is that the Reddit community is huge for Bitcoin, right? For the three of you watching that aren't familiar with Reddit, Reddit is a very popular talk forum on the internet about all kinds of topics and discussions. Obviously, the Bitcoin subreddit is massive. It has 7.5 million members. It was created back in September of 2010. So, like I said a few minutes ago, it was very, very early in Bitcoin's history, right? We're talking about within the first 18 months or so, Bitcoin's history of the Bitcoin Reddit was created. Right now, at the time of recording, there are over 1,300 people that are online in this Reddit community right now, active in there. And it's a top 1% rank by size. Now, a lot of people, when they look at this, right, let's say if they're on one end of the bell curve and they think they're too late to Bitcoin, they look at this and say, oh, I'm too late to Bitcoin. There's 1,300 people just randomly in the middle of a workday here, in this Bitcoin subreddit, right? Like, surely I'm too late. Millions of people are already into Bitcoin. Millions of people have gotten richer in Bitcoin than me. I'm too late to Bitcoin. I missed it, etc. Right? That's what a lot of people feel like. However, I think it's important to note that most people in Bitcoin are not taking Bitcoin as seriously as you are taking Bitcoin, which that might sound like a cop out. That might sound cheap, but I really believe that, right? Most people in the world aren't thinking about finance, retirement, money, etc. seriously, right? If we think of it like a Pareto principle, right, 80-20 rule, it's like that all the way down. It's not only are 80% of the people not wealthy enough to have the privilege of discuss savings, right? But of the 20% that are rich enough to be saving for their future, 80% of them aren't taking it seriously, right? If we were to look at it all the way down the entire globe, right, the 5.3 billion working adults in the world, 80% of them don't have the luxury, the purchasing power that you and I have of probably growing up or living in a Western nation, right? In Europe or the United States, Canada, Australia, something like that, right? As hard as inflation hits us, as much as the cost of living go up, we don't make $30 a day, right? People in our parts of the world make way more than that, right? So we are in the 20%, right? So we're already very fortunate to be in that segment. But then even beyond that, we're fortunate to be in the 20% that actually are taking money seriously, right? 80% of the people in these developed nations aren't actually working really hard and saving for their future, for their family, or for their retirement, right? Just because most people don't have the desire to save. And I think if we keep going down that line, it's the same thing all the way down into this Bitcoin subreddit and within this Bitcoin subreddit, right? 80% of the people aren't taking savings seriously, 20% are, right? Of those, 20% of them are thinking critically about what is money, right? Of them, 20% have come across Bitcoin, the other 80% gold, right? You keep going down and down and down. And eventually, even within this subreddit, I think you get to the same reality that most people in Bitcoin, quote unquote, in Bitcoin or have an interest in Bitcoin, aren't taking it seriously. I would dare to say that I think there's a pretty safe Pareto principle, even within Bitcoin, that 80% of people in Bitcoin are buying Bitcoin are only buying it with spare change, right? Maybe $100 here, $50 there, trying to, get a little bit here or there, trade it for a quick double or 3x, right? Not every single person that's in Bitcoin has a 50-year time horizon like you do, right? Not every single person in Bitcoin is working as hard as they can to reach a certain stacking goal, right? 80% of the people in Bitcoin are just casual observers that are trying to make a quick buck in it, right? Now, you may not agree with me, you may not believe that, but I think the numbers on chain are very much in accordance with that, right? If we actually look at Bitcoin on chain, we can determine that there are at most 4 million entities on the planet that have more than a tenth of a Bitcoin. And so, again, to put that in context here, just this Bitcoin subreddit alone, right, which is a subset of the larger Bitcoin ethos on the internet, right? Just this subreddit alone is nearly, at the most optimistic scenario, twice as large as the number of entities that have 1/10 of one Bitcoin, right? In reality, it's probably a much smaller number of that, right? It's probably 2 million or less entities on the planet, mostly people, right? Vast majority are people, right? This, if you take that assumption, then this subreddit is 4 times larger than the total number of people that have a tenth of a Bitcoin. So you may feel like you're too late to Bitcoin because when you look at the surface, you see, oh my goodness, there are so many millions of people that have already been in Bitcoin. And this group was created back in 2010. Man, I wish I was buying Bitcoin in 2010. But the reality is that, looks on the surface are deceiving. And if you actually look at the reality, probably 90% of the people in this subreddit don't even have a tenth of a Bitcoin in self-custody. Maybe 80%, maybe it is, an 80-20 rule, right? Maybe 80% of the people in the subreddit have less than a tenth of a Bitcoin and 20% have a tenth or more. But whatever the case, no matter how you slice it, it's just you can't square these two, right? You can't simultaneously have at most 2 to 4 million people have a tenth of a Bitcoin on chain and 7.5 closing on 8 million people in the subreddit. You can't have the two at the same time, right? So now let's take some averages and give an example of just how early you are to Bitcoin in that case, right? So 7.5 million entities, uh, or 7.5 million people, accounts, bots probably on the subreddit. That's 2.8 Bitcoin per person on the subreddit, right? And again, I'm saying all this to hopefully try to help you understand that on the surface, things can be deceiving, right? You might look at, oh, 7.5 million people on the subreddit. This is probably everybody in Bitcoin. That means that probably the average person on the Bitcoin subreddit has close to 3 Bitcoin. And I'm saying, don't believe that, right? Averages really skew things to one direction or the other, right? Because let's say if just 10% of the actual users of Bitcoin are in the subreddit, then that's less than a third of a Bitcoin. That's barely a quarter of a Bitcoin. That's less than a quarter of a Bitcoin if you include the Bitcoin on exchanges, right? Because a lot of people might say, oh, well, this is not reality because, not everyone that has Bitcoin has it in self-custody. Many people have it on the exchanges. Well, my point is that the reality is even if you include the Bitcoin on exchanges, you're still at most looking at less than a fourth of a Bitcoin per person on the subreddit from the global amount of Bitcoin on exchanges. So considering the fact that there are not even barely 4 million addresses with a tenth of a Bitcoin, and considering the number of Bitcoins on exchanges, we know with exceedingly high confidence that the vast majority of people, even within the Bitcoin subreddit that's been here since 2010, we know the vast majority of them don't even have one full Bitcoin. Probably the vast majority of them don't even have a fifth of a Bitcoin, right? And I'm not saying that somebody is better or worse because they have more or less Bitcoin or more or less smart, depending on how much Bitcoin they have. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that oftentimes when we're feeling down about ourselves, we want to reinforce that belief, make it feel like we're too late so we can justify doing whatever crazy thing that we're going to do, right? But my whole point in this and trying to help you to understand, you're not too late to Bitcoin. If anything, you're probably too early to Bitcoin. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is that if you look at the various stories on Reddit and anywhere else on the internet, you see people that all the time lost amounts of Bitcoin, right? This is a great post by someone who now switching over to Twitter has made excellent posts on Twitter. He's got 50,000 followers. He's been in Bitcoin for a long time, since 2011. So basically since the beginning of that Reddit community, right? So this is something he said that I think is really, really useful, that people used to post on Reddit when they joined the 1 in a million club, right? Which is if you have 21 Bitcoin or more, right? If you got over 21 Bitcoin, you are in the 1 in a million club. There will never be more than 1 million entities on the planet that will have more Bitcoin than you, which is a huge milestone. If you're looking for a good target to reach to, try to aim to 21 Bitcoin if you're somebody in that net worth level that has the ability to achieve that, congrats. I would say strive for that because there's 330 million companies in the world, right? And not even 1 million of those 330 million companies is going to have 21 Bitcoin. So if you buy 21 Bitcoin and Bitcoin becomes the global form of money, not only are you going to be beating 99.9% of the world in terms of wealth rankings, but you're going to be beating 329.5 million of the world's companies, right? You're going to be in the easily, not just the top 1% of people, but the top 0.1% of companies, right? Now, this was many years ago, right? Way back in the early days. Then it turned into 6.15, right? That was the new kind of goal that people would have as a meme, right? The 21 Bitcoin stacking goal was a meme. Then the 6.15 Bitcoin was a slightly more arbitrary stacking meme, right? And now we're at the point where 1 Bitcoin is still achievable, but it's getting increasingly difficult for people to achieve, right? Like I said a few minutes ago at the start of this video, Bitcoin's over $100,000 now. Most people don't have $100,000 of liquidity just sitting around. Maybe they have 100 grand in equity in their house, but they don't yet have the confidence to convert some of that equity into Bitcoin, either by borrowing against it or selling the asset, right? So my point is that you have less in common with the near future than the past, right? For all of Bitcoin's history so far, the stacking goals have been greater than 100 million Satoshis, have been greater than 1 Bitcoin, have been on the left-hand side of the decimal place, right? But for the first time in Bitcoin's history, and for the entire remainder of Bitcoin's history into the future, every single stacking goal from here on out into the future is going to be on the right-hand side of the decimal place, is going to be less than 1 Bitcoin. We are leaving the brief period in Bitcoin's history, the 15-year or so period in Bitcoin's history, where every single stacking goal ever for every single person was basically over 1 Bitcoin, because 1 Bitcoin was not worth so much to be unachievable for most people. And we are now entering the period where basically every single stacking goal for every single entity for the rest of time is going to be an increasingly smaller fraction of the remaining Bitcoins on exchanges. So I think that's something really, really important to keep in mind. And again, this is not something that's going to stop. This is only going to accelerate and continue, right? This is not something that, is just going to arbitrarily, 25 million sats is going to be the new stacking goal. It's always going to be that. No, it's going to be 25 million, then 10 million, then 5 million, then 1 million. It's going to be less than a million someday, right? How many coins are there for this subreddit? Well, if 1 out of 50 people on this subreddit were a Bitcoin whole coiner, right? That would be about 2% of users. If, let's say, half of those whole coiners, right? Half of those users have 2 coins, and you do the math, that's about 250,000 Bitcoin total, right? Obviously, a few, right? Pareto principle, right? 80-20 rule, right? Obviously, a few dozen or a few hundred of the people in that subreddit are going to have literally thousands of coins, right? So probably we're looking at more like 1/3 of a million, right? But my point is, no matter how you do the math, since Bitcoins are not evenly distributed, right? Since this 1 in a million club is not actually true, right? There will never be a million entities that will have 21 Bitcoin. There will be less than a million entities that have 21 Bitcoin. Why? Because the rest of the world has to use those Bitcoins, right? Because there are the Michael Saylors, because there's everybody else in the world, right? So this is not this is not reality, right? This is just purely an even division, right? An even average division, right? If you actually get into reality, you actually look beyond the surface, you see that it's actually significantly less than 1 in a million companies or 1 in a million people that will have 21 Bitcoin, right? And the same thing is true here, right? The point I'm making here is I highly doubt, even within the highly nerdy, highly technical Bitcoin subreddit, that 2% of the users are whole coiners, have more than 1 coin, or multi-whole coiners that have more than 2 coins, right? And this trend is only going to accelerate. If you are somebody watching this right now that has worked really hard and has stacked 1 Bitcoin, even if you go ask your questions in the Bitcoin subreddit, I think it is a very safe assumption to say that you are already in the top 2% of the wealth holders in that subreddit. I think it's very safe to say that you've obsessed more about Bitcoin than 98% of the people in the subreddit. And if you're asking the subreddit or you're asking other people online technical questions of how to do X, Y, or Z thing, probably 98% of the people replying to you, giving you advice, are people that are going to have less money in Bitcoin than you, that maybe have not actually thought about these things as much as you, right? And that is exciting because it shows you have less in common with the future and the past. But I think it's also something to be really, really cautious about and to be really aware about, right? So let's go through some specific examples here. Posts on Reddit within the last 24 to 36 hours here. I just grabbed the first half dozen or so I thought were interesting. I just want to give you some context of what's actually happening in the rest of Bitcoin world, right? Because I think when you understand how small the Bitcoin niche is on the global scheme, and then you understand that most of that Bitcoin niche is basically still on like level 1 or 2 of Bitcoin education, I think that will help you understand just how early you are to Bitcoin. And I'm not putting anyone down for being more or less educated, right? I want everyone to increase their education, right? But I think a lot of Bitcoiners like yourself that are in Bitcoin all day, every day, obsessively learning tend to be detached from reality, myself included, where we think that everybody in Bitcoin just understands everything about Bitcoin. And that's just not true, right? Yes, people outside Bitcoin, obviously, we all know, don't know much about how Bitcoin works technically or all that. But I think even most people within Bitcoin still have a beginner's mindset when it comes to Bitcoin. It's going to forever feel this way as we have forever more new people into Bitcoin. So here's a great post from about 2 days ago. This is a question somebody asked in the Bitcoin subreddit. How many Bitcoin are available for retail investors? Not sure if this has been discussed before. Yes, obviously it has. But how many Bitcoin are currently available are owned by state, country, institution? Looking for some basic assumptions to get the total amount remaining and ultimately what it means to own a piece of that remainder. 4 million are lost forever. Nearly 1.6 million across all countries, public and private companies, DeFi, etc. That leaves 15.4 million Bitcoin remaining for the world. So even if there's mass adoption across countries and institutions, what that means for just holding 1 Bitcoin or even a tenth of a Bitcoin, ChatGPT, because of course that's never wrong, says it's estimated 10 to 20% of global retail investors own gold in some investment form, physical ETF, etc. So if that holds true with Bitcoin, the retail will only hold between 1.7 and 3.4 million Bitcoin globally from a total 17 available. Really eye-opening, blah, blah, blah. Now, I obviously agree with the main sentiment behind this, emphasizing how even an amount, again, on the right-hand side of the decimal plate, or decimal point of, less than 1 Bitcoin is a significant amount. However, there are a couple things here I want to, address. The first thing is that this is a very common thing people in Bitcoin say that they're lost forever. They're lost forever. No, that's not technically true. Technically, the Bitcoins that have been lost with lost keys aren't technically lost forever to everyone. They're only lost forever to the people that lost them. Okay, at some point in the future, somebody, more likely than not, is going to find those Bitcoins via some quantum computer or some other extremely developed software, computer, whatever, in the future is probably going to find those Bitcoins, right? Because they're lost forever and they're just sitting there until we create a technology powerful enough to reverse engineer and get those Bitcoin, right? Which is a very, very long ways away. Obviously, that's a whole nuanced conversation for another time. And the people that do put in the work to find those lost Bitcoin with quantum computers or whatever else probably have incurred such a cost, they probably won't sell them onto the market. So yes, you could say they're lost forever because the person that lost those keys have lost a Bitcoin, and maybe you could say they're lost forever because they're probably never going to hit the market again, because even when people find them in the future, they'll probably just hold on them. But the point is, that's not technically true, right? I think we should still be dividing not by 15.4, but by the 21 million, right? So, my point is that these are conversations a lot of people are just beginning to have, or, aren't aware that these things have been, discussed, at a very large and deep extent. Here's another great post, another great question from Reddit a day or two ago. Guy asks, hello, everyone. I'm new to crypto market. Would now be a good time to buy, or would you recommend me wait? What platform would you recommend? Binance, others, etc. Right? So, obviously, I don't know who this is, but obviously, I'm going to guess this is somebody that is new, right? He's using crypto terminology. He's asking if now is a good time to buy or wait. Obviously, anyone that's been in Bitcoin more than a couple of years has learned through pain, experience, and seeing other people go through pain and experience that you do not wait to buy Bitcoin, you buy Bitcoin and wait, right? This is a very newcomer kind of mindset, right? Binance is not an exchange I would recommend, obviously, right? It's not one I like or expect, to do super well in the future, right? I always encourage people get a Bitcoin only exchange, run with better exchange fees, right? Binance has a lot of restrictions when it comes to when you can withdraw and all that kind of stuff, right? They have certain benefits too, to get me wrong, but they're generally not one that I recommend at all. Now, if you're someone watching this, I probably should have said this earlier, but if you're someone watching this that is newer to Bitcoin, that doesn't know where to buy it, that doesn't know where to buy Bitcoin, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to text me, and I'll send you a couple bucks of Bitcoin just as a welcome to Bitcoin thing, as a thank you for watching this video. Please avoid using Binance, avoid using other exchanges, feel free to send me a text or, whatever, link in the description below. A text would be more ideal, and say that you're getting off zero, and I will send you some Bitcoin, and I'll direct you towards a Bitcoin exchange that is in your country that is better than Binance, that is cheaper than Binance. So anyway, point is that a lot of people in these Bitcoin subreddits and on Twitter are very new, and that's great. We need the newbies, but these, if you're somebody that's been around for more than 5 minutes in Bitcoin, these are probably not the people necessarily that you want to be getting advice from. So here's another good question regarding something I was talking about earlier with the whole coiners, right? This guy is Alex Bit saying, debunking the 1 million addresses myth, the true distribution of Bitcoin among whole coiners. All right, this guy would say that the average pleb whole coiner has one Bitcoin split across multiple addresses as the accumulated stats over a long period of time. They probably didn't buy the one Bitcoin all at once. Yeah, obviously. That's why the statistic showing the number of addresses more than one Bitcoin, currently around 1 million, is misleading. He's making the calculated guess. The number of active whole coiners in the world today is around 4 million people. The majority of the total Bitcoin supply is in the hands of individuals who have been stacking sats over the past 15 years before companies and institutions started accumulating heavily. Total Bitcoin balance is widely distributed among the plebs. Now, I would strongly disagree with this. I do not think there are 4 million people that have one full Bitcoin. I don't believe that. It's possible I'm wrong, but again, there are barely 4 million addresses with a tenth of a Bitcoin or more, right? And so I hear his point that a lot of people just blindly say, oh, because there's 1 million Bitcoin addresses with one whole coin, that means there's 1 million whole coiners. I agree with that logic, that may be misleading, right? People with 3 Bitcoin may have 3 separate addresses, each with 1 Bitcoin, right? But that actually makes the number lower. It doesn't make it higher, right? If you have 1 million addresses, each with 1 Bitcoin, and you have, some percentage of people with more than 1 Bitcoin having more than 1 address for those Bitcoin, well, that collapses that number dramatically, right? If you just have, let's say 100,000 people or a couple 100,000 people with 3 coins having 1 address for each one, that dramatically shrinks that 1 million address number. And at the same time, we have to keep in mind what I was saying earlier about how there are barely 4 million addresses with a tenth of a Bitcoin. I really don't think that, it just doesn't make intuitive sense to say if there's 4 million addresses with a tenth of a Bitcoin, that there's going to be 4 million whole coiners out there. I just don't think the math adds up at all. Let me see if I can pull up the addresses here. Just give me one moment. But my point is that, I think there's nothing wrong about disagreeing. I think there's nothing wrong about having different opinions, but it's quite concerning to me that people can make these assumptions, and post them that these posts get pretty popular when in reality it doesn't make a lot of sense at all of what we see with the, stuff on chain. It just doesn't make a lot of sense at all to me. So, okay, great. I found it pulled up here. Let's see if I can show you what I'm talking about. So you actually look at the real numbers and not what somebody made up and posted on Reddit. So here are the actual numbers of Bitcoin addresses on chain, right? So you can see that, again, kind of like a Pareto distribution, 80-20 rule, right? The vast majority of Bitcoin addresses have way less than 1/100th of a Bitcoin, 1 million sats, right? I mean, there's 21% that are between 1% and a tenth of a percent of a Bitcoin, right? Nearly a quarter of the Bitcoin addresses are less than 100,000 Satoshis. Another 20% of the Bitcoin addresses are significantly less than that, right? And if we zoom into the important, wealth holding portion of the Bitcoin addresses, if we look at the bottom here with number of addresses between a tenth of a coin to 1 coin or 1 coin to 10 coins, you can see, again, very easily, there is a combined number of about 4 million addresses with more than $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, right? And, down here, if we summarize it in US dollar terms, there are 4,540,335 addresses with more than $10,000 worth of Bitcoin. And yet, this guy over here is saying that he thinks, he's making a calculated guess, the number of whole coiners in the world is around 4 million people. Well, with all due respect, I mean, there wasn't a lot of calculating in this guess. I mean, unless he's trying to also consider the people with Bitcoin on exchanges, but the reality is that there are only, less than 2 million Bitcoin remaining on exchanges. So how can you have 4 million whole coiners hiding on exchanges with only 2 million Bitcoin, right? Maybe you could say, oh, the exchange is rehypothecating it, but then of course they don't actually have that Bitcoin. My point is, I'm not making fun of this guy specifically. What I'm trying to say is that if you're going to blindly assume things, from a group where you know that probably there's a 98% chance that they have less Bitcoin than you, if you're watching this as somebody with more than one Bitcoin. If you got 10 Bitcoin, there's a 99.5% chance they have less Bitcoin than you, right? And I'm not saying this guy, is dumb. He could very easily have way more Bitcoin than me, and it doesn't matter. My point is, I'm saying that, you have less in common in the future and the past, and you got to start getting accepting and becoming aware of this, that you're going to be pretty, for lack of a better word, alone, right? I mean, it's just an inherent trade-off, right? You can't be the 1 in 1,000th richest person in the world while also not being the 1 in 1,000th richest person in the world, right? You can't be in the top 0.01% of world's wealth ranking while at the same time the average advice the average person gives you is useful, right? Like if you're going to be in the exceptional Bitcoin holding top, right? It's like you can't settle for the average advice from the average Bitcoin holder, right? You can't settle for, just you can't take everyone's opinions equally at face value. And that's not saying that my opinion's any better than someone else's. That's just saying that you have to accept that, because I've had many calls with people recently, people looking for Bitcoin advice where they're taking random people's advice or comments just at face value, right? Whether it's from the internet or from, some podcaster or from something else, right? Everyone's in a different point in life. Everyone has different life goals and different life need. And probably most people on Bitcoin aren't going to have as much Bitcoin as you. And so probably they haven't obsessed about protecting that Bitcoin as much as you, right? Even if you only have a tenth of a Bitcoin right now at the time of watching this, like it's just a matter of time, right? In 4 or 5 years, when, we're looking at $1 million Bitcoin and $100,000 Bitcoin, definitely most people aren't going to have a tenth of a Bitcoin, right? So, again, we need the newbies, we need these people. They ask great questions, but, it's just the reality of this point in Bitcoin's history that we're in, right? This person asked, somebody tell me if this is stupid or solid. Okay, well, let's see where this goes. I'm going to start investing in Bitcoin daily, but the thing is that I'm going to use Robinhood to do it. Oh, okay, this is quickly going in one of those two directions. I'm not going to be leaving it in there, though. Every week or so, I'm going to be moving to Blue Wallet for right now, but eventually move it to cold storage. How are the Robinhood fees compared to other exchanges when sending Bitcoin? Really not good. Is there a sold plan? Oh boy. Are there better ways to do this, right? So, again, if you're somebody that's newer to Bitcoin, I know a lot of people that are new to Bitcoin are coming in, right? Highly encourage you use a solid Bitcoin only exchange. I would personally recommend River over Swan Bitcoin because they have less counterparty risk with their custodians or trusts, right? But obviously, right, most of these things are things that most people that are new have no idea about, right? Most people that are just starting that are asking if Robinhood fees are good, they haven't even done the research into what those fees are, probably aren't going to have any idea what a UTXO is, right? And this is a big concern of mine, is that when you combine people that are brand new into Bitcoin that clearly haven't done the minimum amount of research, and we try to help them, right? In this kind of format, like it's too overwhelming and people are just going to go to the easier route, right? So again, if you're somebody that's newer to Bitcoin, just getting off zero, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help you, right? So, again, I don't care what you do. You can buy in whatever exchange you want, but I think the reality is that, a lot of people are going to have a very, very steep learning curve. Now, speaking of a steep learning curve, that is with timing the market. That's another very common mistake people make. This guy here, 2 days ago on the Bitcoin subreddit, said he sold his Bitcoin and regrets it. I sold my Bitcoin just before the price increase at $47,000 because I really needed the money. Now it is $98,000, double the price, and I really regret it. I wanted to invest in long term, and now I have the capital to invest again, but with the increased price, I don't know if I should. Will the price go down to buy, or should I buy now realistically, looking for some advice? So, again, I'm not making fun of people that have less than one Bitcoin. That's not the point I'm making here. What I'm saying is that most people, even in Bitcoin world, don't have nearly as much Bitcoin as some of you watching probably have, right? I talk to people all the time, and the human common emotion is for all of us to think and say, I don't have that much Bitcoin. I only have 2 Bitcoin. I don't have that much Bitcoin. I only have 8 Bitcoin. I don't have that much Bitcoin. I only have half of a Bitcoin. I don't have that much Bitcoin. I only have 26 Bitcoin. I don't have that much Bitcoin, right? I talk to people all the time that have any amount of significant Bitcoin, right? A third of a Bitcoin to hundreds of Bitcoin that don't feel like they have that much Bitcoin and they just casually have it on an exchange, right? You may have 2 Bitcoin on your Kraken account or your Swan account or your Gemini or whatever account you have it on right now. And you may not feel like, oh, I should take self-custody because you feel like you don't have that much. But the reality is 2 Bitcoin is 204,000 right now. That's a lot of money, especially in a liquid account. If you get one malicious person that logs into that exchange and withdraws for you, then that Bitcoin is effectively gone, and good luck at getting it back, right? So again, the point in this video is to help you understand your biggest risk in Bitcoin is not that you're too late to Bitcoin, that you didn't get enough. Your biggest risk to Bitcoin is that your emotions are playing a trick on you. You're being biased by seeing these screenshots and stories of people that more Bitcoin than you, and you're so emotionally focused on that and wishing you had more, you're forgetting you're forgetting the forest for the trees and realizing that most people haven't been as fortunate as you, that most people haven't been in a developed world like yourself, right? 80% of people haven't even gotten to the base layer zero opportunity to be able to buy as much Bitcoin as you have. Most of the people that were buying Bitcoin sold the Bitcoin. Most people that were buying the Bitcoin didn't sell the Bitcoin, also lost the Bitcoin, right? And most of the people that had the money to buy the Bitcoin actually bought the Bitcoin, didn't sell the Bitcoin, didn't lose the Bitcoin, then probably lost some percentage of that to some sort of lawsuit or tax thing, right? Most people are not in the same set of shoes that you are going through right now if you've managed to stack a third of a Bitcoin or 4 Bitcoin or 7.5 Bitcoin or 28 Bitcoin or whatever it is. You are in a very, very rare place in the world today. Even if it feels like that, oh man, I'm so late to Bitcoin. So many more people bought more Bitcoin than you, right? You know, this guy here probably doesn't have nearly as much Bitcoin as you have because it sounds like he sold all of it. You didn't say that explicitly, but that's what it sounds like it's being implied, right? This is somebody that, again, probably doesn't understand the significance of the value of the thing here, of the Bitcoin, right? So, you know, lots of great comments and questions here. So, as we wrap up here, let's go through a couple more. So again, you know, my larger point with this video is hopefully optimistic caution, right? Hoping to help you consider these things slowly. This is a really great question I still get from people that really needs to be addressed here. This is a great question from somebody, again, barely 2 days ago, right? The question is, how do you know if somebody has your seed? Scenario. You create an offline wallet, you send a little money to it and store it on something physical like metal, titanium, right? Let's say person finds the seeds, writes it down, blah, blah, blah. You know, a couple things you can think of, you know, to try to protect it or whatever, right? Basically saying he's paranoid, right? You know, this is somebody that probably has a problem very similar to what a lot of you watching are going through right now, where you bought Bitcoin, you didn't sell it, you didn't lose it, right? You were no longer asking the beginner newbie questions of this kind, right? And you're asking the more advanced questions like this kind of how do you know if somebody has your seed? The answer is you don't know. You don't know if somebody has your seed. If you've written down your seed phrase, you don't know if somebody has it or not, right? If you write down that seed phrase and you put it in your bedroom safe or in your safety deposit box or whatever you do, you have no idea if somebody has seen that seed or not, right? You can go on a vacation to some Bitcoin conference. Somebody breaks into your home when you're gone. They take a picture of that seed phrase. They leave like nothing ever happened. And 8 years from today, when you deposit another Bitcoin and the address, then they take it, right? Bitcoin is like time traveling energy where you can buy a share of the network today and essentially send it into the future by holding it. But everything in life is a trade-off. You don't get something for free without a cost. And the cost is that someone can also steal Bitcoin in a kind of form of time traveling, right? I've seen it in multiple scenarios where people make a mistake with their Bitcoin self-custody, and then the Bitcoin grows in value, and only then in the future is it stolen, right? I've seen that kind of scenario before. Let's take a theoretical example of 1 Bitcoin. Somebody takes a picture of their seed phrase, 5 years ago, well, one Bitcoin was just, a few $100s or a couple grand or whatever, right? They didn't think much about it. It wasn't worth a lot, right? And they keep holding it in that seed phrase. They hold it for 5 years or 8 years or whatever it is because, well, hey, nothing's gone bad yet. And that seed phrase has been good for 8 years, right? Nothing bad has happened. Why would I move it? Why would I change it? Why would I need to upgrade my security? There's no reason to do that. I have no reason to assume that seed phrase has been compromised. Maybe you're right. But if you made that mistake a few years ago and somebody finds that photo in the future because they think, hey, we think this, Billy Bob guy, we think he's got some Bitcoin. Let's try to get into all of his accounts. Let's get into his email accounts, his Google Drive, his, work emails, right? Let's see his exchange history, right? Basically, they can try every kind of way possible to figure out if you've made a mistake without you even knowing. And if they are to find just a picture one day, that's something that's very common, right? People, these hackers or these scammers or whatever, find a picture somebody took of the seed phrase years ago, and then they just drain that, right? That's a common scenario, right? Somebody could, like I said, I've seen that before, where someone breaks in your house to try to take a seed phrase when you're gone and away on vacation. Let's hope and pray you don't have a wife or kid at home, right? My point in response to this question is that I can tell very quickly how, in general, much Bitcoin somebody has based on the kinds of questions they're asking, right? And my personal interpretation from what's being said here, just from obviously it's much easier to get that kind of guess when I'm actually talking to somebody, just because I've talked to literally over 1,000 people with these exact kinds of questions, right? It's, obviously I don't, not everyone shares how much Bitcoin they have, right? But, it's something that is something unintentionally I've gotten good at, is just I'm able to tell based on the level and kind of questions you're asking, like we can basically tell what your main pain points are, right? This guy, his pain point is he's getting to a personal level of net worth that he's starting to get paranoid, right? And he's asking these questions, but he's not yet been in Bitcoin long enough to realize the answer to this question, right? If he was actually in Bitcoin a bit longer, he would not just be starting to paranoia, he would already know that, this is not a question you ask on Reddit, right? This is not a question you ask because then now people are going to, follow this guy, right? I mean, it's like, if I'm a bad guy and I see this kind of comment, this is somebody that I would probably want to go after, right? Because, oh, hey, this guy's posting this question. He's probably got a good amount of Bitcoin and, we can find this Reddit. Maybe we could reverse engineer that to some kind of degree. Maybe we could start messaging him or something, trying to get any kind of details out of him. We know he's probably got some sort of seed phrase and, it sounds like, there's things we can work with here, right? This guy's probably even easier because it sounds like he's going to be on exchange. We probably already know what exchange he's going to be on. So, this guy's probably even an easier target to go after because he's not in self-custody. However, he's probably got less Bitcoin, less of a target, right? And again, I'm not saying this to say that I'm just saying this because I want you to start thinking like a malicious person. You need to start thinking like an active bad actor, right? If you're going to start posting these kinds of questions to Reddit, you need to understand that first and foremost, 98% of the people on this Reddit form probably are not as informed about Bitcoin as you, probably aren't securing as high of a percentage or nominal amount of net worth as you are. And also, there are malicious bad actors just on these places online, right? And that number is only going to grow, right? As the value of Bitcoin grows, there's only going to be a larger and larger number. Here's another great question. Somebody asked, again, just a couple days ago about UTXOs. Person asks, I've been seeing lots of things about UTXOs and it's getting me worried. From what I gathered, I'm assuming each time I send an amount of Bitcoin, let's say a million sats of each time to my cold wallet, I'm creating a new UTXO. Yes, that's correct. That is why it's best to send large amounts. Yes, once I've set an amount of Bitcoin in my cold wallet 10 times, I would have 10 UTXOs, correct? To consolidate the UTXO, to have to send Bitcoin back, etc. Appreciate any help. So again, lots of great questions on there. But my point is that something is going to happen someday where you're going to need help, right? And this is the reality of being a realist. You could be an optimist or you can be a pessimist, no matter which way you could look at it, right? You could say you have less in common with the future and the past, right? If you want to be an optimist, you take that statement, oh, we have less in common with the future and the past, and that's going to be great, and the future is going to be awesome, right? You can take that in terms of price and look at things and say, hey, in terms of price, this is going to be great, right? Someday, Bitcoin's going to be 5% of global assets, right? It's about 1/5% right now. Someday it's going to be 5% of global assets. Let's say MicroStrategy, the company, someday owns 3% of all the Bitcoin. That's about a 50% increase in their Bitcoin stack from here. Let's say the stock has a 2.5x premium, which I think is going to be quite low in the future. And let's say the US government increases the number of US dollars by about 30% in this undetermined amount of time, right? If you were to do that math, that would be about $58.5 trillion worth of Bitcoin in the world as on a market cap basis, right? That would be about $4.4 trillion for MicroStrategy, that corporation, for their stocks total market cap, right? Obviously, we don't know how many shares are going to dilute this into, but that would be the total market cap of the company. That would be a $2.8 million Bitcoin, or about $18,000 per MicroStrategy share price. Now, obviously, I think both these things are extremely conservative, right? Because I don't think Bitcoin's going to stop at being 5% of the world's global assets. I think it's going to easily be greater than that. I think MicroStrategy is going to probably own more. I think the stock premium is probably going to go up by more. I think we're going to print more than 30% of the dollars in the world, right? So, we're easily looking at a multi-million-dollar Bitcoin in the midterm future. We're looking at, tens of thousands of dollars per MicroStrategy share price. So you can take this statement and say, you have less in common with the future and the past, and say, oh, that is a blindly optimist statement. You are being too bullish. And okay, maybe you could say that, right? We have less in common with the future and the past. Every stacking goal up to this point has been on the greater than one Bitcoin stacking side, right? It's been on the left side of the decimal place. Now we're entering the period on the right-hand side of the decimal place, right? Like, you can be an optimist and say we have less in common with the future and the past. But the point I'm trying to get across here is that your biggest problem in Bitcoin is probably not you don't own enough Bitcoin. Your biggest problem is that you aren't bullish enough. You aren't optimistic enough on the kind of wealth that you hold. You're mentally preparing yourself for a 2x, a 3x, or a 5x in purchasing power, but you're not preparing yourself for a 50x in purchasing power, right? Take the fiat dollar amount of Bitcoin you own right now. Like, when that amount of Bitcoin is worth 10 times more than what it's worth right now, do you really want to be paying somebody $50 an hour to help you secure that multi-million dollar Bitcoin stack, right? Do you really want that? Do you really want to be asking any questions of any kind on Reddit, right? Like, that's not a good plan. Not a good plan. I'm not making fun of people that do that. I'm just saying that if we're talking about you, or you have a significant amount of Bitcoin, that's just not a good plan. You don't want to be asking questions to the world randomly for it to be time-stamped forever, where now all of a sudden you're basically exposing your own weaknesses to a hungry pack of wolves out there that could figure out where your problems were, even if you didn't realize you made problems 5 years ago that you can't trace, right? You can't know for sure if nobody else has your seed phrase, right? Every time you leave your home, you can't know for sure if nobody has broken into your home and stolen that seed phrase, right? And you may think that's being paranoid right now, and it probably is, to be frank. But when that Bitcoin is no longer 30 grand, when that third of the Bitcoin is no longer worth 30 grand, but we're talking about hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, let alone tens of millions of dollars, like, we have to start being paranoid. We have to start thinking critically, because the malicious people out there are going to try to get that Bitcoin, right? If you can't have your net worth be one of the highest rankings in the entire world, right? You can't be in the 1 in a million club and have mediocre average security, because if you have mediocre average security, you will cease to be in the top 1 in a million club. And so my point in all this is to be the crazy optimist saying Bitcoin's going to millions of dollars, but it's also to be the realist and to say that I talked to hundreds, now at this point over 1,000 people, about the Bitcoin self-custody education. And I'm telling you, it's the same exact thing. It's the 80-20 principle. Most people that are in Bitcoin don't have one Bitcoin. Most people that have one Bitcoin have exceedingly subpar Bitcoin security, right? And if I was a malicious actor right now, if you're watching this and you're a scammer, I'm telling you what you already know, which is where you can make the most money in the world today is taking advantage of these Bitcoin whole coiners that are being negligent and keeping their Bitcoin on Coinbase, keeping it on these exchanges. It is so easy to get the private information, hack these exchanges, in the same way that you steal their identity with a credit card, you get into their bank account details, right? It's the same thing with an exchange, and you get that money basically scot-free, because unlike the banking system, you can't reverse a transaction, right? So, I'm not, obviously, if you're somebody that's scamming people out of the Bitcoin, I'm not encouraging you to do that. You should repent for your sins and get right with God for stealing money from people. But you already know that. If you're watching this and you're a scammer, you already know that, because I see it relatively frequently, okay? So my encouragement here for you watching is that your wife, your kid, your cousin, your nephew, grandkid, friend, whoever it is in your life you're thinking about right now, right? You have to keep them in mind too. The odds are you probably, if I'm speaking to the whole world here, you probably don't have a whole Bitcoin. If you're somebody watching this where you have a whole Bitcoin, you probably aren't as far along the education journey as you know you should be. And if you know that about yourself, you know this is even more true with your loved ones, with that wife, with that family, with that business, with that whoever else in your life, right? You don't want to have your family, your spouse, your kids, your employees, your business partners, whoever is in your life, you don't want to have them be vulnerable because you made some mistake that was purely out of just a lack of knowing, right? Of not knowing what you didn't know, right? Because this is pretty brutal when those kinds of things happen. So I'm going to give you options of what you could do. The first option is what most people are going to do. Most people, if you're watching this is exactly what you're going to do. You're going to do nothing. You're going to procrastinate. You're going to say everything's fine until suddenly nothing is fine and all the Bitcoin is gone. Okay. This is an option you can do. I am telling you now that is stupid and that is foolish. I'm not trying to make fun of you. I'm trying to snap some sense into you into doing one of the other two options. The second option is that you can help and hope your loved one stays as obsessed about the Bitcoin self-custody as the malicious people out to get them. Now, that loved one of yours is probably going to be on their own, right? Because that loved one should not be posting questions onto a Bitcoin subreddit. They should not be posting questions onto Bitcoin Twitter, right? Right now, Bitcoin Twitter and Bitcoin Reddit may be a happy, cute, wonderful place where everyone is just singing kumbaya and wants to help each other. But I'm telling you, again, you have less in common with the near future than the ancient past. Bitcoin is entering into the mainstream. And at some point in the future, every single person that has Bitcoin UTXOs, every single person that has any significant amount of Bitcoin is going to be perceived as somebody incredibly rich because not even most companies will have Bitcoin UTXOs, right? And so if you're going to be leaving Bitcoin for your wife, for your kids, for your loved ones, if you're going to be leaving Bitcoin for them to inherit, right, you have to admit that you're going to educate them. This is your second option. You can educate them. And then at some point, they will be on their own because there was nobody left for them to trust in the world, right? If you're going to leave $10 million, $30 million, $50 million, $100 million of Bitcoin for your family, like it's foolish. You have to actively remind them. Don't post questions online. Don't seek help from people because the exact kinds of malicious people out there you don't want helping your wife and kids are the people that are going to pretend to be the most helpful, right? So that's something that has to be really, really emphasized here. If you're not going to be stupid and foolish and do nothing because you're a procrastinator and you're going to pursue option two, you have to remind your family that they have to be obsessed with this Bitcoin you're leaving them. They have to make sure they have everything with their self-custody locked down forever. Geographically, on-chain, they have to get everything right forever with a 100% success rate, okay? That's the first thing you have to do. Second, they have to mitigate that tax question, right? With the estate tax, that could be 40% of the Bitcoin, right? If you got 10 Bitcoin, that'd be 4 Bitcoin going to the state if they don't manage that estate tax question properly, right? You have to keep in mind the long-term capital gains question, right? You have to keep all those things in mind. If you're going to be somebody that wants to evade the government, give them the middle finger and say you lost it in a boating accident, okay, you have even more work cut out for you, right? So you have lots of options there. Obviously, I don't encourage you going with that last route, but that's your second option. Educate your family on everything to do with minimizing custody risk, tax risk, and legal risk, right? And as a spoiler alert, I'm just telling you, because I've seen this before many, many times, spoiler alert is 90% odds they won't do that, right? They won't do it successfully. That is just the reality here. I mean, that you may not like that, but that's just the truth. So only the third option is you can hire somebody to help you, right? I don't care what you do, okay? I don't care what you do because I know no matter what I say, you're going to do what you're going to do. If you have an emotional problem where you are addicted to procrastinating, like nothing I say that is trying to be of reason or logic is going to convince you to take action here, right? If you've made up your mind, Bitcoin's a scam, and then nothing I say trying to orange pill you is going to orange pill you, right? I don't care what you do. Obviously, I want you to do the right thing, but I know that my feeling of responsibility ends on this side of the camera, right? And like you are fully responsible for your own actions. So I know that, again, prior distribution, 80% of the people that own Bitcoin will do nothing and they will lose it because they are being negligent with what they have. The 20% of you that are going to actually do something are going to do it on your own. You're going to have the loved one do that. You're going to, give them everything that they need to know. But the reality is that probably most of them aren't going to hold on to all that Bitcoin, right? And some of you will hire somebody, in this case, probably me, to help you with that, right? And my encouragement in this is just to say that there are 40,000 40,000 people that follow me. I mean, again, if we're taking 80-20 priority distribution, right? And we assume that in the future, 100,000 people are going to follow me. I am just one guy. I am just one dude, right? I can't help 100,000 people. I can't help 40,000 people. And so when I say I really don't care what you do, I mean that, right? Because I can't help 100,000 people. I just can't do it, right? It's like, it's not possible. So it's not even like, I do any better or worse off, even if most of you ignore what I'm saying, because it's just, even if you wanted me to help you, I won't be able to, right? And so I'm making this message not for the people watching this video in option one, not for the people in this video watching option two, but for the people in option three that want to actually take this seriously and treat their Bitcoin like it's already worth tens of millions of dollars, right? Because, of the 100,000 people that follow me, maybe I can help 100 people. Maybe I can help 300 people, right? But it's not going to be 1,000. It's not going to be 5,000. It's definitely not going to be 50,000. And if, God willing, the next decade or so, Bitcoin does what we think it's going to do, and it's going to be multiple hundreds of thousands of people, this is just the reality of how it goes. So I'm trying to give everyone the best shot possible. I used to talk to people for free because really, like, I care more than anything that you just do it and you take action, right? It's like, I want to see as many Bitcoins remain in the hands of the people like yourself that were in Bitcoin for the right reasons, the ethical reasons, that have been in Bitcoin since these very, very early days. I don't want to see Bitcoin going to the scammers or to the government or to the lawyers or to whomever, right? I want to see it end up with you, right? And so I've been having these conversations with people for free for a very long time, about these kinds of questions that this person is asking, right? This person, this Reddit asked a couple days ago, right? If you die, can someone restore your Bitcoins or are they lost forever, right? This is a question. Oh, shoot, we're losing it here. This is a question I think is a very good one that I've been happy to discuss with people for free for a long time, right? This guy's asking, he's thinking about giving away the location of the seed phrase to the third person. The wife is the second, so the wallet can be restored when they die, right? It's just, that's not a terrible plan. Because not only are you the single point of failure, but now the wife is the second single point of failure, and this new third friend person is the third single point of failure. And so if you or the wife or the friend make a critical error at some point over the coming decades, then that Bitcoin is going to be lost, right? And if you're going to add in parents or other people, you're adding only more complexities, right? Any one person could fully rug pull everybody else, right? And who's going to get in trouble here? The kids. The kids are the ones that are going to get screwed over because you have so many single points of failure for that Bitcoin, right? So, again, I'm happy to talk about these things. I talk about these things in these videos all the time for free to the point of probably obsession. But my point is, if you want to talk to somebody, if you want to have a conversation, you can book me. I don't like charging by the hour. I really don't, but I have to because otherwise it was just too much. So right now you can book me for 99 bucks. The information's in the link in the description below. You can text the phone number on the screen, your name, questions, whatever you want. If you want to book me, again, I don't care. Most of you aren't going to book me. That's fine. I'm just letting you know, for those of you that think you might want to have somebody help you, I'm just letting you know that I genuinely am trying to keep it as low as I possibly can, right? I know I could easily be charging 300 bucks an hour. I know I could be. I'm not saying it to brag. I just know I could be, but I'm wanting to do as much as I possibly can. So right now, 100 bucks, book me for an hour. It's pretty soon. I'm going to be raising it, right? The whole point of this video is I'm just letting you know that's going to be going up. And when that goes up, I don't want people complaining that, oh, Luke's trying to charge for too much. He's trying to price gouge people, because I was trying to do it for free for a long time. And it's just reality that eventually time's going to run out, because at the end of the day, I am just one guy. I'm one dude. Now I've got 40 people on my team that would be happy to help, right? And I think that's a huge advantage, right? Every single year, we get 40 years of cumulative Bitcoin experience, right? Our team literally has 3 centuries worth of Bitcoin experience over the last 8 years, right? So, I mean, and I'm not actually just a lone guy, but whatever the case, I'd love to help, meet, and get to know everyone. But the reality is I can't even help 1% of the people that follow me, right? 1% of the people that follow me right now is 400 people. I can't even help that many, right? So for 99% of you watching this video, you've already tuned out. You don't care, right? Maybe you don't have enough Bitcoin that you're taking your self-custody seriously. Maybe you have some sort of emotional blockage or analysis paralysis that's preventing you from taking the next step. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the people that are actually taking this seriously. Only the first 400 people that are going to take this seriously. So feel free to reach out. Feel free to text. Happy to help. I'm doing everything I can to give it away for free, right? The reality is that not every single person is in the same solution, right? It's not as simple as just recommending a blind device or product and saying this product is the best for you. I don't know who you are. I don't know what your journey is. I don't know what your end goals or targets are, right? And so to blindly say, I recommend X product for everyone is just not only not helpful, it's actually counterproductive. And I would argue damaging to people in many scenarios, right? Which is why I don't like to do that, right? So if you're too cheap to spend $100 to secure a Bitcoin or more, you very probably are going to lose it. And that is just the brutal, honest truth. You don't get to be this ridiculously early to Bitcoin without a ridiculous amount of risks and challenges in front of you. I'm desperately telling you this message now in January of 2025, because guess what? By March of 2025, this is going to be a very different conversation. By October or November of 2025, this is going to be a conversation that is almost impossible to have, okay? That's why I have this sense of desperation. It's why I have this pounding you over the head with this message. It's because I don't care what you do, but I'm letting you know you have a very short window of time until one Bitcoin is a significant amount of life-changing wealth, and you do not want to have your self-custody, your tax, or your lawsuit mitigation solutions being on the backhand side of that rate of price growth, right? You do not want to have that. If the price grows faster than your Bitcoin security, you are going to lose your Bitcoin at some point in time. Either you do the work right now, or you hire somebody like myself or my team to help you do it with you, okay? I am telling you, if you do neither of those things, you are going to lose it, okay? I'm just telling you the brutal, honest truth there. You can give me a text. You can reach out whenever you want. One more post here from Reddit. This guy asks, tips for safely memorizing an entire seed phrase. No, I'm not giving anyone my seed phrase, nor am I responding to any DMs or anywhere else, blah, blah, blah. He has a seed phrase safely stored away, but he loves the idea of being able to recover your Bitcoin by memory in a serious, crap hits the fan type situation, blah, blah, blah. I remember this is a stretch. My point is that, again, most of you watching this video should not be thinking like these people on Reddit, right? Even though you might feel like you're too late to Bitcoin because this Reddit's been around forever and it's got millions of users, you should not be, almost all of you, you should not be memorizing your seed phrase, okay? You got 5 Bitcoin, guess what? If that 5 Bitcoin is going to be worth, $2 million a coin, or $2.8 million a coin when Bitcoin's 5% of global assets, like I was saying earlier, right? Let's say it's 2.8 million a coin. Let's say you got 5 Bitcoin. That's $14 million. You really want to travel to a different country when you have a seed phrase memorized that's worth $14 million? Like, what are you, like an idiot? Right? Like, would you travel around with $14 million of unmarked cash bills in your back pocket that somebody could take that's as small as a Post-it note, right? It's like, goodness gracious, man. It's like, yeah, maybe you're self-sovereign, but guess what? Somebody points a gun to your head. Like, actually, what are you going to do? Right? God forbid you're with your wife or a kid, right? Because then you're putting them at risk, right? So if you're somebody that's watching this that isn't like somebody that's casually taking this flippantly, you probably should not be memorizing the seed phrase to your entire multi-generational wealth in your head. You probably shouldn't be doing that. You probably shouldn't be leaving your single sig address in your home when you leave the house and when you go to vacation. And likewise, you probably shouldn't carry it on you if it's a significant amount of money, right? You probably should not be giving multiple people in your family full undiscriminated access, or your lawyer full undiscriminated access to your Bitcoin seed phrase. You probably shouldn't be doing that, right? You probably shouldn't be asking Reddit these questions, when they're trying to figure out if they should use Robinhood or Binance or River, right? This is my point. The point I'm making here is that we can be super excited. Bitcoin's going to be on a massive bull market this year, and the next couple of years are going to be thrilling with how high Bitcoin price is going to go. My point in all this is that everything in life has a trade-off. And the trade-off we are rapidly accelerating to, we are rapidly approaching to, is this reality that the vast majority of people in Bitcoin are not going to have gone through the experiences that you've gone through. The vast majority of people in Bitcoin have not going to have gone through the same challenges, highs, lows that you've gone through, and they're probably not going to be as obsessed with their Bitcoin as much as you are obsessed with your Bitcoin. And so your only option is to double down on your obsession, turn this into your full-time job. If you're only learning about all these Bitcoin nuances, taxes, custody, and lawsuit stuff, if you're only learning about that in your evenings after from work, that's probably not good enough. You probably need to spend all day, every day obsessing about this indefinitely. Why? Because the people that are malicious out there, the people that aren't like me, that aren't telling you this message, that are waiting like a crouching lion or tiger trying to take your Bitcoin, right? Those people are going to obsess about it. It is their full-time job to figure out how they can take your Bitcoin. And if you're going to casually learn about this on the weekends, or you're just going to watch a YouTube video or two and assume that you're just fine for the next 10 years, I'm desperately warning you, you probably aren't. It's just a matter of time, right? I am probably more obsessed about Bitcoin than you. Not because I'm smarter than you, not because I have more Bitcoin than you, but because this is what I do for 70 hours a week. And I've got a team of 40 people who also work, 40 to 80 hours a week, right? Every single week, we get a year's worth of experience, right? Every single month, we get, what would that be? 4 years worth of experience, right? Every year, we get 40 to 50 years of experience, right? It's just proof of work. And if the bad guys, if malicious people out there are putting in 10 times the number of hours into figuring out how to steal your Bitcoin than you're putting into figuring out how to protect it, like, what do you think is going to happen? I'm trying to tell you this now. I'm being repetitive with it. I'm being annoying with it. I'm saying it in as many possible ways as I can because I know most of you will not listen to me and I'm protecting myself, right? In the next 5 years, when 1,000 people that follow me lose half of their Bitcoin, none of them, not one, is going to be able to say, Luke, you didn't warn me. I did everything I could to warn you. So I don't care what you do. Reach out to me. The cost for my time is about to double from $100 to $200. You can reach out to me. I'm doing everything I can to keep it as affordable as possible. Or you can do it on your own. I wish you all the best at having a 100% success rate the first time with zero errors while we're looking at a 60% CAGR for Bitcoin price. Wish you all the best. But the only people that are going to really, really for sure regret this are the people that procrastinate. So more than anything else, please stop procrastinating. Take it seriously.